Science Friday is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Insurance isn't one size fits all, and that's why drivers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So, whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
WNYC Studios is supported by Alienware.
Alienware's back-to-school event is the perfect time to score top gaming gear with incredible features and advanced engineering to go beyond performance. Start your Alienware journey with the Alienware 15 gaming laptop featuring Intel Core processors. Game, live stream, and multitask for hours on end. Pair your incredibly smooth gaming experience with immersive visuals and sound by saving on sleek Alienware monitors, headsets, and more. This limited time sale awaits you now at alienware.com/deals.
Hey, I'm Flora Lichtman, and you're listening to Science Friday. Step away from the Taco Bell Crunchwrap Supreme, says the FDA. An outbreak of foodborne illness caused by the parasite cyclospora has been cropping up across the country, sickening thousands. And after months of trying to track down the source, investigators have linked some cases to shredded iceberg lettuce supplied to Taco Bells in 5 states: Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, Ohio, and West Virginia. The Washington Post broke the story and linked the lettuce to one company, Taylor Farms. Here to give us the latest on this investigation and to take us into the world of food detective work is Byron Chaves, a food safety expert from Rutgers University. Hey, Byron, welcome back to Science Friday.
Hey, happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you for coming. Thousands of people have gotten sick. Many of the rest of us have been wondering what not to eat this summer. I feel like this has been a real nail-biter. Has the cyclospora mystery been solved?
So not quite yet. We actually have today probably more questions than we did yesterday.
Oh, say more. Tell me.
Well, with this new development that lettuce might be implicated, then, we have a number of other questions about how did contamination happen? Is this really a single source? Is potentially Taco Bell the only retail chain that it's involved? Is any of this lettuce in the market right now?
Right, because, I know that the states called out by the FDA and CDC didn't include, for example, New York, where there have been a bunch of cases. So what does that mean?
Yeah, it probably means what we've been thinking about for the last couple of months almost. It seems like this outbreak has been lingering for forever. But that there's actually more than one outbreak happening at the same time, right? So we finally have a lead about a proportion of the cases that might be associated with consumption of contaminated lettuce. But that doesn't mean that there are not other outbreaks happening simultaneously. And like you mentioned, there's 5 states associated with the lettuce one, but there's many other states. There's 34 states where people have reported getting sick, including New York. And so there might be a series of outbreaks happening.
So news outlets have been pointing to Taylor Farms. Does that suggest that the parasite came from processing or from the farm itself?
I would be cautious about pointing towards a specific source right now because, as of Friday morning, I think it's too early to tell exactly where this is coming from. Now, what I would say is that cyclospora is not what we would typically call an environmental organism in food processing, right? So when the lettuce is getting shredded in a food facility and mixed with a lot of other lettuce coming from different places, it's not like this microbe is surviving in the processing environment. What is more likely to happen is that the microbe already came with the heads of lettuce that were introduced into processing facilities. So think about lettuce that got irrigated with contaminated water and stuff like that, right? So the more likely cause of direct contamination is irrigation water.
Why has it taken so long to figure this out?
Yeah, epidemiologists are working really, really hard to figure that out themselves. I think that again, there's this hypothesis that there's a series of outbreaks that are happening at the same time, and while some of the cases may be attributed to consumption of contaminated lettuce, there could be other cases associated with either recreational water or potentially other foods that are happening across the country.
Recreational water. Do you think it's a possibility that people are getting it from swimming?
I think that there's multiple hypotheses, and recreational waters, despite what the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services is saying, has been implicated in outbreaks of cyclosporiasis, and there's evidence, documented evidence from other places in the world, right? Maybe there's untreated wastewater or semi-treated wastewater that ended up in recreational lakes and such. And because we're seeing so many thousands of cases, that it is a possibility that recreational waters could have contributed to some of those cases. Now, the other thing that we have seen is there's no reported cases in Canada, right? And so I do wonder, what's happening across the lakes when people in Detroit and other places in the country here are getting sick, and no Canadians are getting sick, right? So that will also give us a little bit of a hint as to what foods were distributed in the U.S. that were not potentially distributed to Canada, and we could potentially start narrowing this down.
So we've talked on this show about budget and staffing cuts at various government agencies. Do you believe that those played a big part in this outbreak being so big?
I would also be cautious about that. I think that by the laws of life, the outbreaks would have happened anyway, right? I think that what we are missing here is a little bit of connection between the CDC and other federal agencies and state governments. Every time that we make cuts to public health infrastructure, there's going to be a consequence, right? And the consequence here was probably that the response could have been faster, but certainly the outbreak would have happened anyway.
Tell me a little bit about the parasite itself. I mean, I've heard that it can cause problems for weeks. Someone had symptoms for 100 days.
Mhm.
Is it exceptionally hardy?
Yeah, parasites are one of those things that in general we're terrified of, right? Because of the way that these organisms have been portrayed in the media, and there's some reality to that. Now, the truth about cyclospora is that as scientists and microbiologists, we still don't understand a lot of the infectious cycle, the biology of this organism, the detection methods that we have may not be the most adequate. And so certainly we have a lack of scientific resources in that regard. What we do know is that this is not a person to person transmission, right? So we know that the infection cycle happens in a variety of stages. And when people have cyclosporiasis and they shed the parasite in their feces, that parasite that comes out, it's not immediately infectious. It needs some time in the environment at the right temperature and the right relative humidity, um, contaminating water or produce, so that then people will consume that water or produce and get sick themselves. So it is an interesting life cycle.
I mean, explosive diarrhea has been the cyclospora catchphrase. Is that scientifically real?
Explosive diarrhea, it's not really a clinical term, right? So it is an interesting term, but what we mean by explosive diarrhea is that a proportion of the cases will have gas, right? Will have a lot of gas accumulated in their bowels, and then this basically makes you have a very loud, aka explosive bowel movement. But the diarrhea will be we describe that as watery diarrhea. That is a better term for that.
Why does bagged salad so often seem to be a culprit in these food safety stories?
Yeah, that is a phenomenal question and a phenomenal mystery as well. Now, bag salads is a product of convenience and a product of we want produce year round, and we want accessibility to things, and that is great. Now, when we bring any raw agricultural commodity from a farm into a processing operation, there is a chance that that raw agricultural commodity, like lettuce, may be contaminated with something, right? There's obviously on-farm food safety practices that are followed, but there's always chances. Now, one of the things that happens here is that hundreds of heads of lettuce are being mixed and cut and chopped and placed into packages, right? So we have a variety of heads of lettuce that come from either a single source or multiple farms, increasing the chances that there could be cross contamination, right? So even if only a proportion of the lettuce that came into that processing operation is contaminated, then when we chop it and mix it, then everything is just going to be contaminated.
You're a food safety expert. Is there some kind of magic technology in the pipeline or process that would prevent outbreaks like this?
If I had an answer for that, I wouldn't be a college professor. I would be a billionaire. But but I think people are working really, really hard on finding alternatives for what we currently have. Now, what we currently have is things like chlorine, right? Chlorinated water where produce is immersed, but that is not effective for pathogens like cyclospora. It is effective for things like E. coli and salmonella, right, which are bacterial foodborne pathogens. But cyclospora is a very hardy organism. When we find it in the environment, it's in this sporulated oocyte that is extremely resistant, right? So we are finding other ways. For water, there are technologies like microfiltration and reverse osmosis, but those are expensive, right? So it's not always available.
Okay, given current info, what are you going to avoid at the supermarket?
That is a great question, and I'm not in the business of telling people what not to eat. But the way that I'm gonna save that I'm gonna save myself and my soul is by saying that I do consume produce, but I don't typically eat salads. And so the produce that I consume at home is just typically cooked or stuff like that. I have never really been a big fan of leafy greens myself, except for spinach. And then I eat it cooked at home. So that's the way that I'm saving
Cook your
myself.
food. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing from you, Byron.
Totally, but we don't want to cook cilantro, right? I mean, what kind of experience would we have? But keep an eye on the news, right? Once the sources are confirmed, we will have, of course, more certainty. But if you do want to cook your produce, then 158 degrees would likely kill the parasite.
There you go, 158 degrees. Byron Chaves is an associate extension specialist and professor in the Department of Food Science at Rutgers University in New Jersey. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
This segment was produced by Annette Heist and Charles Berquist. Do us a solid, rate and review the show. And number 2, tell your friends about us. Thanks for listening. I'm Flora Lichtman.